Okay, greetings everyone, and welcome to yet another webinar hosted by the Vets History Workshop. Today we have our presenter is Rebone Tau, who's going to talk about the rise of factionalism in the ANC Youth League. So this discussion or this presentation is taken from a book, The Rise and Fall of the ANC Youth League, which was published last year, August 2020. So a quick bio of Rebone. So Rebone Tau is a member of the ANC. Rebone has served as the ANC Youth League National Task Team member in 2018. He has also served as an ANC Youth League Regional Executive member. In the ANC, she was the ANC Youth League Chairperson of International Relations. Rebone continues to serve in the ANC NEC International Relations Subcommittee. Rebone was also with the Southern African Liaison Office for 10 years as a senior program manager. He has also worked on countries in conflict such as Zimbabwe, the Central African Republic, DRC, South Sudan, and Lesotho, lobbying the Department of International Relations and Cooperation and the ANC on their position in those countries. Rebone has also led the South African delegation to Ecuador in 2013 to the World Youth and Students Festival and handed over the South African flag to the Minister of Youth of the hosting country, as South Africa was the previous host. Rebone recently joined the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung Foundation in January 2020 as their program manager for political affairs, focusing on South Africa, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Namibia. I mean, that's a very extensive CV. Rebone also has a YouTube channel, and the link is right there in the chat section for those who want to check it out. It's called Politicking via podcast with Rebone Tau. So she talks about these and other issues affecting our daily bread, you know. So the structure of the seminar will be as follows. Rebone will talk or speak for not more than 20 minutes, after which we will take comments and questions from the floor. Another reminder also for the audience is that these sessions are recorded and they will be made available via the History Workshop website and on our social media pages, that is on Facebook and Twitter. That is the Vets History Workshop. So without preempting any questions or comments or what Rebone has to say, I will hand over to her. Over to you, Rebone.
Thank you, Tabiso, and thank you to Vets History Workshop for hosting me today. And good day to everyone that is part of the discussion today as we reflect on the Youth League. And I mean, we all know that recently, those who are in South Africa, that the ANC has again formed another national task team of the ANC Youth League, which was formed the beginning of this month. Now, this book is not a book that's my knowledge, but what I did, I did interviews, you know, with different leaders that have led the Youth League in different eras, starting from 1944 when the Youth League was formed, but also having the likes of Prince Buthelezi, who was a member of the Youth League 1948 to 1950, who's currently was the leader of the Inkatha Freedom Party for a very long time. He just stepped down recently. So it was a well-researched book. But talking about the rise of factionalism in the ANC, the rise of factionalism in the ANC Youth League is because of the factionalism in the ANC that has led to the rise of factionalism in the Youth League. Now, we can go back as far as 2005, when the then Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Jacob Zuma, was recalled as a sitting Deputy President of the Republic. And later, there were also issues that he should step down as the deputy president of the ANC at the time. And at the time, the president was Thabo Mbeki, president of both the ANC and the Republic. And the NGC at the time resolved that no, Zuma should remain as the deputy president of the ANC, and he will no longer be the deputy president of the Republic. Now, this is now building up to a conference, which was in 2007, Polokwane. And the Youth League was divided. And at the time, Fikile Mbalula was the president of the Youth League. You had the likes of Rebone Tau, who was a deputy president of the Youth League. And Rebone Tau was supporting Thabo Mbeki, who was running for third term as the president of the ANC. And you had the Youth League under the leadership of Fikile Mbalula resolving that no, they should support Jacob Zuma to be the next president of the ANC, building up to that conference. Now, this is where you start to see, the Youth League supporting Jacob Zuma. Not everyone within the Youth League, because there was that view of also Thabo Mbeki serving third term within the ANC. The Youth League now would start to go to Pietermaritzburg High Court, as we know that Zuma is still in court on that matter, the arms deal saga. So you have now the Youth League now starting to pronounce itself, and Rebone Tau is then suspended, because of his dissenting view that he's not agreeing with the collective. But also when you look at even the culture of opulence in the Youth League, which is also linked to the rise of factionalism, because now it's about fighting for resources. And you start to see the opulence that is displayed by the leadership of the Youth League at the time, showing off, expensive lifestyle. I mean, you have even guys like Brett Cable, which in the book I do mention Brett Cable, who was a businessman, of which he's late right now, who started then giving money to these young people within the Youth League. So the factionalism is more about strategically positioning yourself to a particular faction within the ANC so that you can benefit from those if they win the conference. And we saw that after Polokwane, when Jacob Zuma won the conference, then you had former leaders of the Youth League being appointed in ministerial posts, like even the likes of Mbalula was appointed as a deputy minister when he started, who's currently serving as a minister. And then you move forward now to Mangaung, because a conference of the Youth League took place in 2008 after the ANC conference. And that 2008 conference of the Youth League, it was also still linked to factionalism within the movement, where the race was between Saki Mofokeng and Julius Malema. And Saki had been in the initial executive committee of the Youth League for some time and heading organizing within the Youth League. And Julius Malema was coming from a province as a provincial secretary of the Youth League, but historically he was more popular within COSAS because having been the former president of COSAS. And this conference again collapses, of the Youth League in 2008, and this is immediately after Polokwane. And then they had to adjourn in Mangaung and reconvene in Nasrec, where the ANC again comes and dictates and says delegates must accept the outcomes of the top 5. When delegates were saying there needs to be a rerun because the numbers are not making sense in terms of the votes when they look at the outcomes of how both candidates got their votes. Now you move then to 2011, building up. Now there's then divisions between the sitting president Zuma and Julius Malema, who were then initially were friends, building up to Polokwane. Now they're divided, and interesting enough, it has always been around the presidency, because in building up to Polokwane,
the story, the backdrop quite nicely, what you just asked.
Sorry, can everyone mute? I think there's some unmuted people. Thanks. Sorry, Bonnie.
Okay, building up to Polokwane, it was around Thabo and Jacob, who were both in the presidency. Now you go to Mangaung 5 years later, it's also around the presidency. The two names is Kgalema and Jacob Zuma. And yes, at the end, yes, Kgalema says he's available, he is contesting to be the president of the ANC. And the Youth League, again at the time, is divided. And you had people like Stella Ndabeni, who is now in the Provincial Executive Committee of the ANC in Eastern Cape, coming out, distancing themselves from Julius Malema, people like Mdumanana, who were also in the National Executive Committee of the Youth League, being suspended. And now the Youth League now is divided around these two figures in the ANC presidency of who should continue or who should lead now as a new leader. Now, interesting enough, even after the whole issue of Stellan Ndabeni being suspended in Mdumanana, we now see them also being appointed as deputy ministers by Jacob Zuma, because of they were now singing his praises. So on the whole divisions within the ANC is more about allegiance and being strategically positioned to a particular individual. And now you then proceed to see how then the Youth League is disbanded, in 2013, and this is divisions and the factionalism that is brought into the Youth League by ANC leaders who themselves are fighting their own political battles to retain power and to retain also resources, because once you have political power, you do have access to resources. So the main factionalism that the Youth League has found itself over the years is because the ANC itself, it is failing to have a succession plan where they can agree and be a consensus that from this president, this one will then take over as the president, because most of the factionalism, how it rose in 2007, it was about the presidency, it was about people saying that the South African constitution, you are only allowed to serve 2 terms. And why would Thabo Mbeki then want to serve 3 terms when the constitution of the ANC, of the Republic, is saying 2 terms? But the ANC constitution, it's very silent on the issue of terms. So in the ANC, you can serve as many terms that you want because it does not have limitations for you to serve as the president. But what is interesting enough, again, you start to see the divisions after Malema's expulsion. And there are those now who seem to want to take over the Youth League, in terms of its presidency, And in the main, you have Ulemabi, who was a trial general and currently ANC spokesperson. He was a trial general of the Youth League. And you had Lamola, who was a deputy president of Julius Malema in his 2nd term when he was elected in Galaga in 2011. But because of the ANC leadership at the time, does not want them, to lead the Youth League. They first have the task team in 2013, and later when the task team is ready now to go to the National Congress of the Youth League, the ANC leadership decides to change the status of that Congress to a consultative conference because they are not comfortable with the main candidates who are running front runners for this for that Congress. And later in 2015, the ANC decides that they will decide on Colin Maine, and Colin Maine is then instructed to run for president of the Youth League. As much as Colin Maine was not popular because him availing himself, he avails himself 2 weeks before Congress. He is not known in the whole country by delegates, by branches, that who is this Colin Maine. But in the ANC, what was then popular at the time, it was the Premier League. So the Premier League were then deciding on who must lead the Youth League, whether in provinces, in regions, or national. And now you have both Lamola, who's now serving, both of them, and Pule Mabis now, they're currently serving the National Executive Committee of the ANC, and the other one is in government as the Minister of Justice, Lamola, and then Pule Mabi being the spokesperson. They both do lose at this conference in 2015. They don't reach threshold at this Congress in 2015. So in 2015, you go into a conference of the Youth League where the factionalism is so rise that they did not even go and vote in terms of what is normally known, where you will be nominated from the floor or you'll be nominated by 3 provinces and your name will automatically go to ballot. These were 2 very prominent leaders in the Youth League, but their name could not reach threshold due to the interference of ANC leaders who were not comfortable. And we know that Lamola at some time was very vocal about the Zuma must step down, Zuma must go. And so obviously those were really also some of the things that played themselves, that they were not comfortable with having someone like him as the president of the Youth League, who's very vocal against the sitting president of the ANC and the Republic. I will end there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that talk, Rebone, which I believe it's quite, it's very key because yesterday was Freedom Day and we're having you, we're hosting you here to talk about this, our future leaders. Whenever you work or stay in the township, you know that people are very frustrated with the progress of our freedom. So it's actually I think it's very key that we got to host you here today. And yeah, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna open our session to the floor for comments and questions. So maybe something that I should have mentioned at the beginning is that our session is supposed to end at 2:15. So let's keep in mind of that. But yeah, so what we're gonna do, we'll take rounds of 3 questions or comments. Each round will be 3 questions or 3 comments. And then we give Rebone time to respond to those. So you can show, if you've got a question or comment to make, you can show that by using the hand feature on Zoom, or you can actually also indicate on the comment section there. And then me and my colleague, Laura, will be looking out at those. And then I will just read them out for everyone so that we're all like together. So yeah. We will wait for, okay, Laura has a question. Yes, Laura, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebone. Really interesting. So the way I really look forward to reading the book, but based on your presentation, the way that you discussed the Youth League was really deeply tied into the politics of kind of the more senior ANC. To what degree do you think that the Youth League has its own politics that are going on that are perhaps, it has its own logic? I don't want to say independent from the other parts of the ANC, but they're following its own logic. Or is it just completely, can we only understand Youth League politics by looking at what's happening at the national level? Thanks.
Laura, thanks. I mean, currently you have a task team that is formed, right? And the interesting part, the ANC dissolves the Youth League task, ANC NEC, in 2013. In 2021, the ANC still controls the affairs of the Youth League and decides and dictates, and they can do whatever that they want. And they've shown over the past 7 years or 8 years that the ANC Youth League is not independent, because young people themselves are not rising and saying, we would love to rebuild our own ANC Youth League. So the ANC then sits around the table, both factions, and they would sit and say, in the Kasi language, we say, Kamina Kawena, you give me yours, I give you yours. So they will sit around the table and decide that, okay, give me one name here, I give you one name here, and we put these kids together to be in one group. And as things stand, most provinces of the Youth League, I'll give you an example, Gauteng, Northern Cape, Northwest, Eastern Cape. Literally, they've not been to their conferences since 2014, some since 2013. And per the constitution of the Youth League, their mandate or term of office lapsed a long time ago. So some of them have been in office for like 6 to 7 years. But because of the relationship that they have with the provincial executive leaders of the ANC in their respective provinces, they are not touched. They're led to just continue to lead this organization that actually no longer exists in terms of structures. It only exists probably on paper, but in terms of the structures, they're no longer there. And when this young task team now is being put in place, one would have thought the ANC will automatically dissolve all structures. Now, you have these young people coming in, busy meeting with people who that legitimacy of age is also questionable, because you have people who in provinces today are sitting in office and they are over the age of 40, and the Youth League cutoff age is 35. And you ask yourself, on what basis do these people still represent young people? So the problem is that is how you flirt with ANC politics and ANC leaders that you can survive in the Youth League politics. But if you don't flirt with them, then you are gone. And that's why we still have, as I'm saying, that across the country, all provinces are still intact, are still in place, and some of them have been in office for 7 years. The only time the Youth League can find its voice and its independence is to remove themselves from factional battles of the ANC. And what was interesting about the appointment of the current sitting task team of the Youth League, the appointment of the task team comes at a very interesting and critical time for the ANC as it approaches the 2022 National Conference, which is due to take place next year in December. You've got also the National General Council, which we might see later this year, coming up, you know. So, and the Youth League, by the way, you must remember that when they go to the ANC conference nationally, they are given a status of a province. They vote, they've got rights to vote as other provinces. And secondly, they are allocated 90 delegates. So right now, the Youth League, the role that is playing in the ANC is just a mere game of numbers and being used as pawns in the ANC factional battles. What they don't realize is that they are sitting in a very strategic position, because lessons can be learned and they can make reference to the ANC leadership based on what has transpired since 2013. And I like what Julius says recently, Julius Malema, when he speaks about the issue of the step aside. And he says, since they've expelled me, they have been changing the leadership of the Youth League, like they're changing underwears, you know. And the question is that if the Youth League is still going to be handled by ANC comrades, is it still relevant to pursue the struggle of young people in this country and the challenges that are facing the youth of this country?
Hi, Rebone, are you still there?
Yeah, no, I just ended there. Yeah.
Riso, do you see Bafana's hands up?
Okay, yes. Bafana Mhlapo, yes, your hand has been noted. Please raise your comments or question. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chairperson of the session, and also Comrade Rebone for your input. My question is emanating from the linkages you've been making about how supporting a particular or critiquing a particular candidate towards the race for presidency in the ANC has become a rewarding scheme for those who are vocal within the Youth League with a ministerial position. Now, you've made those linkages, and I wanted to hear you more with regards to Lamola. Do you see Lamola as part of the beneficiaries as well of that particular scheme? Do you still think he's part of that generation that was speaking about economic freedom in our lifetime, the transformation of the judiciary, which now is presiding over? Do you see him as a person who used a generation that he belonged to affirm himself as a critical leader, yet also be subject to the very same scheme of rewarding our generation with a ministerial post because of their singing a particular tune? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Comrade Bafana.
Okay. Okay, Rebone, I have two more questions in the comment section, so I wanted to include them. Okay, actually, maybe respond to that question, and then we'll take those two questions as the next round.
Thanks. Okay, I think I start by saying I want us to go back to the formation of the Youth League in 1944 and the 1948 program of action. Why I'm bringing this up is because the Youth League at the time went to Guma and made a proposition saying, here's a program of action we are giving the ANC to adopt. And if you look at that program of action of 1948, it's quite similar to the resolutions of the Youth League in 2011. So the Youth League was merely reminding the ANC leadership of this program of action that was adopted. But when the Youth League at the time of the generation of 1944 were supporting a particular leader for presidency, it was more on ideas and a program of action that speaks to the people of South Africa, that speaks to the liberation of the people of South Africa. But today, when the Youth League goes to a particular leader within the ANC, it's about themselves, positioning themselves. And yes, you make a correct analysis, with a good question. Now, Lamula was in the forefront of the Zuma must fall, which in the ANC, it's a foreign culture. It's not something that is done, because in the ANC, as much as the ANC's got its own challenges, but branches do engage on some of these issues and should pronounce themselves. And it was very foreign to see Lamula standing alone with a placard at St. George's and saying Zuma must go. And as some have argued that, by the way, Lamula has been rewarded, for his vocalness or braveness that he's shown around the issue of Zuma, and he was awarded, a ministerial position, But with the transformation, of the judiciary, which is very interesting. If you look at the JSC, interviews that have been happening for the last few weeks, and you look at the role that the EFF is playing there, it's very good, because it is really shaking the judiciary system, but also strengthening our democracy, that judges must never be appointed because of they are populist or they are loved by a sitting president. If you look at that, and one thing is that even if you look at the posture of the Minister of Justice during the JSC sittings, you can see that he's found wanting, he's back-footed, and yes, one would say that it will take time, for this transformation, as long as we've got young leaders who go in. And I'll give an example. Let's go to the Fees Must Fall. The Fees Must Fall, those who were at the forefront were beneficiaries of that struggle. Today, they are members of parliament. You will never hear them talking against what is happening currently. A young person who was not a student, who was passing by in Braamfontein, lost his life. And those who were also products of vets, who are today MPs, who were there in 2015 during Fees Must Fall, are quiet. So it shows that people, once they get in and get a seat at the dinner table, they forget about that the struggle continues, instead of them pushing those at the dinner table to bring all these changes in this country. Because I like what you said, Tabiso. Yesterday we celebrated 27 years of democracy. What does that mean in terms of service delivery? A lot of challenges that are facing us as a nation. Yesterday I was even reading a statement by the Minister Lindo Sisulu on the issue of the Cuban engineers that have just arrived in the country. What does that say to South African professionals? Not one taking away the historical context between South Africa and Cuba. So the problem that when young people are given an opportunity to sit at the table, they're there for themselves. They're not there for a generation to advance the struggle. That is the main challenge that we're facing. And Lamula, yes, he no longer speaks about economic freedom in our lifetime since he's become minister, whether in his capacity as a deputy, as the national executive member of the ANC, when he addresses as the way he was vocal, building up to the ANC conference. And when the ANC itself has adopted, whether people can argue what radical socio-economic transformation or radical economic transformation, it talks about those transformations. And now these leaders, you find that now they're preoccupied now with blue lights and not caring about the daily struggle that the people still find themselves in every day. I'll end there.
Okay, thank you, Rebone. So now we have about four comments and questions from the chat section, which I'm going to take and make them around. So you're going to respond to quite extensive questions and comments. And so I'm just going to read them out for the benefit of everyone. And please take note of these. So the first one is from N Heffernan. And it says, thanks for your paper, Rebone. I'm looking forward to reading the book. Your answer to Laura's question was extremely striking, that in some provinces, the Youth League effectively just exists on paper. What do you think are the origins of that decline at the local and provincial level? Does this go back to factionalism in 2007 and after, or are there earlier roots? And then the second comment and question is from Tukelo Nhlap. So it says, what does Rebone think is the relationship between factionalism and the possibility of socio-economic mobility of ANC Youth League leaders? That is, ANC Youth League leadership seeing the Youth League as a stepping stone to deployment in state institutions such as NYDA, Parliament, etc. And then the next one is from Kelly Forrest, which says, do you think the ANC Youth League's lack of independence from the ANC is driving youth into the EFF? And then the last one from this round is from Zama Mtunzi. And it says, what has made the ANC Youth League a historical force is its independence from the ANC. When does the Youth League start being dominated by the ANC? At which time? Who was president? And what are the political causes that led to this domination? So these 4 comments and questions are going to make up this round from your response. So I hope you've captured all of them. Okay, over to you.
Sorry, Rebone, you're muted.
Yeah. Let me start with the last question in terms of the independence and the dominance, of the Youth League. The Youth League has never been independent from the ANC. In the Youth League, it is clear that it's autonomy, but it derived its existence from the ANC. So the Youth League can have its own programs, its own conferences, its own resolutions, but it is not independent. And this thing was argued in 1991 when the ANC leadership came back from exile, building up to the Youth League Congress when they were re-establishing the Youth League in the country. Because there was what we call SAICO, the South African Youth Congress, which was led by the likes of Peter Mokaba, the first president of the Youth League after the relaunching. Currently, there's a guy called Ambassador Rapumle Kane, who was the Secretary General of SAICO. So then the issue was there because SAICO was independent, you see, and you have COSAS, which is also independent from the ANC. So when now they were saying, okay, we need to merge SAICO and all the youth formations into now relaunching the Youth League, that was debated, the issue of the autonomy and how far can it go. But the problem is that the ANC tends to undermine the autonomy of the Youth League. And Youth League members have allowed that because of issues of material conditions. And yes, the dominance, of what happened in the Youth League, it comes at an era where Thabo Mbeki is the sitting president, and you have Mbalula, who's the sitting president of the Youth League, and they're not agreeing going to this conference in 2007. But it becomes worse post Polokwane, because some can argue that actually the ANC was left in Polokwane, because coming from Polokwane now, you are taking the Youth League to its national congress, which then sits in Mangaung in 2008. And the behavior of delegates at that congress, some even had to undress and do all the funny things that people had never seen, happening in the Youth League. And these things happen under the presidency of Zuma. But it will be dangerous for us to reduce problems of the Youth League to an individual. there is a collective, you know, and a collective that that when they went for the rerun in Nazareth, where Mantashe went there and told delegates that whether you like it or not, you turn pink or blue, you are going to accept the outcomes of the top 5 as the National Executive Committee. We have decided. So even when the Youth League is disbanded, it was a collective effort. The current sitting president, Cyril Ramaphosa, was the chairperson of the appeals committee. We all know that even Julius tried so hard to save his membership. He wrote to conference in 2012 to say, you can take everything away, but not my membership. That letter was even thrown out by the ANC leadership. We're sitting there as a collective. And going to that question, the weakness of the Youth League today has indeed given the EFF growth, because EFF just merely took everything, like, you know, they took the whole office of the Youth League and left with it. And if you look at the 2015 NEC of the Youth League that was elected, led by Colin Maine, it was very difficult for them to even speak on the 2011 resolutions of the Youth League, you know, that speaks about economic freedom in our lifetime, which was a conference decision in 2011 and the theme of that conference of 2011. So the more the Youth League is preoccupied with ANC factions, and they're losing the ground of where they're not being the voice of young people, because why? They want deployment. I'll give you an example. In 2015, the Youth League takes a conference resolution, and it says 40% of deployment must be young people. But the ANC debates it further with them at the policy conference in 2017 and says, we're only going to give you 20%. But this 20% was people actually talking about themselves. They were not talking about South Africans in terms of young people, whether in different sectors, that we need to find young people swelling the ranks in different sectors based on experience, capacity, and all those things, you know, and qualifications. You look at in 2015, in 2019, for the first time, you had a Secretary General of the Youth League who sits in the deployment committee, who sits in the list process, which is chaired by the Secretary General. His name was there himself. So when he went to negotiate, he did not go and negotiate for young people to end. He went there to negotiate for himself. And today he is a sitting Deputy Minister of Home Affairs. So you have for the first time a sitting Secretary General, which according to the constitution of the Youth League, it is a permanent position. And even in the ANC, the Secretary General is permanent. But the ANC leadership, because of factionalism, they undermined the constitution of the Youth League and override that clause or rule in the constitution and allowed a sitting Secretary General to rise into power and go into government and become a deputy minister. I mean, you had literally in the top 5 of the Youth League officials, only the TG who did not go to parliament. You had the president, the deputy president, and the Secretary General. And the Deputy Secretary General was then deployed into her province as an MPL. She's serving as an MEC of sports. And you had the president of the Youth League only resigning in parliament after the cabinet was announced. So because he did not find his name into cabinet, so now he then resigns as a member of parliament and goes back to the Tuli House full-time, you know. So you can see that people are not there genuinely, but they're there for their own economic struggles. And I always say that the thing with the ANC is that most people in the ANC join the ANC for wrong reasons, but everyone joins the ANC for different reasons. There are those who have lived in poverty and have seen so-and-so in the community, join the ANC, 2 years down the line, they're driving a BMW, you know, they're wearing Louis Vuitton, because those are things that have preoccupied the Youth League members, your Louis Vuitton, your Gucci, you know, your Centene, you know, lifestyle, you know, which I always say new money is a problem because it makes too much noise, you know. So you have then, youth league leaders preoccupied with all these material condition things. So when you join because you have seen that this thing can actually take you to Kanana, where you want to arrive, where you also want a better life for yourself. So this is like, because deployment does not say you need to be qualified. There's nothing that says you need to have a particular experience. You can just become a counselor with just grade 10, and which is said, especially post 1994, you'd expect that people have empowered themselves with knowledge because the conditions are better. Yes, things are not as bad in terms of these NEFSAs. You can do your matric. You don't have to, like in the past where people had to drop out and to go and join the ANC in exile, or their lives were threatened in the country. So till today, you have people who, I know some of Youth League councillors who were in the National Executive Committee who are still serving in this administration as we are going to local elections, who the highest, they only have grade 7, which we call standard 5. And these were young people who were leading, who just dropped out, and the caliber that were leading the Youth League, people who, because sometimes, even if you don't have qualifications, but becoming an intellectual, an organic intellectual, people that read, most, you find that they can't even articulate themselves. They can't even articulate ANC policies themselves, so you find yourself there. But in terms of the first question by Anne, the origin and the factionalism, building up to 2007, factionalism has always been there in politics. And that's why I go back to the generation of 1944, when they supported Moroka over Kuma. But the factionalism that we're seeing today, it's a factionalism that is linked to a particular lifestyle. And that's why today we're sitting with what we have at Zondo Commission. I mean, on Monday, I was surprised to even see celebrities tweeting on what Noma was saying, that literally the whole country was listening. And this guy, Malusi Ligaba, is the longest serving president of the Youth League that it has ever had in its history. And his wife is found there speaking of the shenanigans that he used to get up to. Is someone that Youth League members used to look up to him because politically he is sound, but the issue of this opulence lifestyle and the Moyer lifestyle and the taboo lifestyle has really killed the spirit of people being true revolutionaries. I always like to take a quote from Che Guevara, open quote, which says, "A true revolutionary is guided by the love of his people," close quote. And today in South Africa, we're missing that, especially in the Youth League. And the reason why, there is lack of political education. So you join today, you become a leader today, you can become a councillor tomorrow, without any being taken through and swell the ranks and grow and understand your purpose to this organization and how you must serve and protect. And also sometimes this notion of saying the ANC comes first has also brought young people to think that the ANC is everything, forgetting that before you're a member of the ANC, when you are born, you are a South African, your parents receive a birth certificate that says Rebone Tau, born in South Africa, South African. You then later decide to join politics. With the Youth League, you join at the age of 14 already, per the constitution. But in most cases, you find that most people start becoming active around the age of 18 in the Youth League. But the reality of the matter is that this notion that they are taught that because you must protect this organization and destroy this country, because there is nothing without this organization, this country won't move forward. So those are some of the things that the ANC, and this is the problem, post-1994, all these people went into government and they left an organization that did not have a caretaker to look at things like political education, making sure that the structures of the organization are functional and they are not bored. Because the issue of money in the ANC did not start in Nazareth as people are portraying it. In Polokwane alone, there was money flaunting, in that conference. And people don't talk about that also, that historical conference, of the ANC. So the problem is that the ANC neglected its mandate, the leadership in 1994 when they went into government. And they forget that there's an organization, and they come back later and get shocked that there's no organization because they start to see all these foreign tendencies. These foreign tendencies did not start in 2005. They started gradually, bit by bit. We can go to what we call the historical also conference of Mafikeng. We can go to the Stellenbosch conference. Some of these things, that's when they started, and so forth. Thanks, I'll end there, Thabiso.
Okay, thank you very much, Rebone, for your responses to those questions and comments. So I have two questions here in the chat section, and I'm going to add a third one, and then that should make up our round. Hopefully time will allow us for you to respond to this fully. Kelly Forrest has another question there in the comment in the chat section, and it says, how do you think the post-apartheid ANC Youth League contrasts with the ANC Youth League of the apartheid years? And then there's another question from Itumeleng, which says, can you reflect on the gender dynamics of leadership and factionalism in the ANC Youth League? It's interesting that women are at the helm of the leadership of the ANC Youth League, NTT, today. Is this perhaps as a result reflective of women's organizing within the party? What do you think we can learn from this, given the history of leadership in the Youth League? So that's question number two. And then my question has to do with, and I feel like maybe some of it you would have covered in your responses in that last round. But I'm just interested as to know, like, is there any ideological position of the current ANC Youth League, and what is it? And I feel like that's what I believe made people like Julius Malema and the ANC Youth League of the past maybe more vibrant and more visible, was because they had an ideological position, whether we agree with those positions or not, but those positions were visible. So I just want to know if the current ANC Youth League has a position, in any ideological position, and what is it, and how can they maybe go about making that ideological position more effective and more visible? Thank you.
Thanks, Thabiso. I mean, the Youth League post-apartheid, let's say, okay, let me start by saying, if you look at in the book, I've got a section in the book where we look at the ANC, because in exile, there was no Youth League. You had the ANC Youth Insurance section. And the role that they were playing, at that particular time was very important in a sense of also organizing young people who were across the world, young people in London, you had young people in Soviet Union and so forth, and the Nordic countries and so forth. But also they were putting education to the front, and yes, you had young people in the camps. And that's why the logo of the ANC Youth League is called Fight, Learn, Produce, because you had young people who were working for the ANC, which were now, and then you had young people who were in school. So the producing ones were the ones who were working for the ANC. The learning ones were the ones in school, Fight, Learn. And the fight is the ones who were in the camps. So they tried to look at the different groupings of young people, but put them together through that logo, unite them to understand that they are one thing. They are not, that not others are better than others, So there was a vision. And post 1994, you have Youth League that is led by people without a vision, in terms of where are we going as this country. I always say the Youth League finds itself in a very strategic position because they are a Youth League of a ruling party. They are able to influence, and the Youth League in its nature, it's a body of opinion in the ANC. It brings new ideas to the ANC. And today, we're seeing a youth league that is looking to bring new ideas to the ANC. That's why the generation of 1944, if you look at the 1956 boycotting programs that were happening in the country, it was because of the youth league was saying to the ANC, you need to change. You can't become just a gentleman's club and be just an elite organization. The youth league changed the character of the ANC at that time, and so that the ANC becomes a mass organization, a community-driven organization, so that they don't leave South Africans behind, but that's so that South Africans start to take part and support all the campaigns that the ANC will be embarking on. Because for the longest time, the ANC leadership were just about writing petitions to the Queen in London, and writing petitions to the Prime Minister in South Africa. But when the Youth League then comes into play, the Youth League then starts to change the politics of the ANC so that it pushes pressure on the apartheid regime. So today you have a Youth League that has got an opportunity to influence the ANC and to bring new ideas to challenges that are affecting young people. That's why most young people will tell you when they vote, why they vote for EFF, some of them, is that they can't relate with the ANC because ANC is led by elders, and they can relate with the EFF because the EFF is led by young people who speak their language. I'll give you an example. In the last elections, I've got two younger sisters. The other one was born 1994, and the youngest was born 2000. They actually split their votes in this 2019 elections. And the reason we're saying, we're not voting for the ANC, we're voting for Ramaphosa. We want to give Ramaphosa a chance and to see if Ramaphosa will change, the status in terms of the economy and so forth in this country. But they were saying that we identify ourselves with the EFF. So these elections, we might be going to local elections. Yes, they'll be very interesting. The ANC continues to win what we call the historical communities, but there's a decline that the ANC is not talking about. And there's a rise of the EFF that people are not talking about, because you go to KZN, just last week's by-election, the EFF has rose, like the numbers are going up. They might not be winning wards, but the numbers are going up, and it will hit the ANC when it comes to also the PR. And that's how the ANC lost all these metros that they lost. It was not because they lost all the township votes. They retained the township votes, but the voter turnout, the numbers were very low. So those are some of the things that the ANC itself and the Youth League itself needs to really see how they do things, but not, and you see the task team that is appointed today, they need to really question themselves as a collective about what is the real character of the Youth League. Because the real character of the Youth League, it is not a Marxist Lenin. They don't speak ideas. They're about action, The YCL and SARS-CoV, that's why they always work together. And you have COSAS and the Youth League historically. COSAS has always led the ANC Youth League because COSAS people, they tell you, in the morning we go to school, after school, we're part of the community. So they're able to identify themselves with challenges of the community. And that has always been the role of the Youth League. So from an issue of gender, I think for me, it was more because the 2021 is dedicated to Charlotte Maxeke. The task now will be for this woman to see, will they rise to the occasion? Will they make sure that they don't find themselves preoccupied with the factions playing themselves in the ANC? Will they guard the Youth League and say, we are going to rebuild this organization? We don't care who becomes the president of the ANC, but for us is to rebuild. Unfortunately, it has been indicated that they're saying they will go to Congress in the next 6 months. It is not possible. You can't prepare for a national Congress within 6 months where you don't even have structures that you can say, in this province, we've got a particular region which branches there are in good standing, the leadership is in good standing. So imagine provinces where there's never been a provincial conference in 6 years. What about branches there alone? So the task for them is that if they fail, then they would say women can lead, women fail. So they need to make sure that they protect the struggle of women, you know, as they were appointed during the year of Charlotte Maxeke, who was a true revolutionary, a feminist, you know, someone that worked hard with people, but also supported the struggle of workers, you know, and a lot of things. So, and unfortunately, at this present moment, we've just been seeing them having more programs more than being on the ground doing organizational work, which is to say, indeed, they're rebuilding, because by now you have even expected that they would have disbanded provinces, you know, and the regions, and say, we're putting in task team, or if not, the other option actually not to put task team, because even the issue of task teams is going to divide them. Because this other grouping, because that entity also alone is two different groupings within the task team itself. So we are going to have them also fighting it out, going to the PTTs. My advice would have been to them that disband regions and provinces and just say branches must submit their membership, take branches to BGM, go to national conference, because the national conference is not a national conference of provinces and regions, it's a conference of branches. So as long as you have got the 2/3 majority of branches in good standing, then you can go, you will come back and rebuild the organization and take regions to conference and take provinces to conference once you have then built, put a national executive committee. And what was interesting, I was observing the other day on Facebook, because the convener of the task team was part of this crisis committee, which was kept on, you know, having matches and saying that young people must be given this machine, young people must be given back the youth league. Now, people are then being noted on social media and saying, if they don't go to Congress in the next 6 months, we are going to make sure that we form another crisis team so that they must also go. So already you have these things of, you just have to form a parallel structure and then you'll be rewarded in the ANC, or do something anarchic, you know, and then you'll just get a reward in the ANC. I mean, ideologically, the Youth League can have a new ideology. The ideology of the Youth League is based on its founding documents, what kind of an organization is. That's what I'm saying. People who are leading this task team need to go back and understand the character of the Youth League when it was formed in 1944, because the challenges are not different. They are still the same, even till today. And that's why I make a reference to the 1948 program of action, to the 2011 resolutions of the Youth League, because both Julius knew that what that generation of 1944 Yabo Mandela was saying then is still relevant even today in this country. If we are to advance the struggle of those that have been marginalized for a very long time, have not benefited in this country, whether or not, whether people can argue that, okay, capital doesn't have color, some in the ANC have argued, no, it's white monopoly capital and so forth. But for the mere fact that there's a small grouping that still controls the means of production in this country, and majority of these the people of South Africa still live under very difficult conditions. We've got issues. I mean, I'll give an example. Today, you don't even have a youth league that can stand up in its ward and say to the councillor, you are not doing what you have promised the people going to local elections. Issues around service delivery, basic things like water, electricity. You know, I was in Grahamstown, which is now known as Makana Municipality, 3 weeks back, and we went to interview the mayor and the different role players in Makana on the challenges facing them, and especially in the main has been water. But you'll never hear the Youth League of that region saying anything. And these are things that the Youth League has left the society to say, these are your problems, and that is not the character of the Youth League. The Youth League, it's more community-driven, it's radical in its approach, brings new ideas, and the radicalism can't be killed today because the ANC is in government. The Youth League must critique the ANC. When the ANC is not delivering what it has promised the people of this country, the Youth League must be the ones to first stand up and say, you can never fail the people of this country, especially because this generation that is leading the ANC is those who were some in exile and some were part of the UDF during the apartheid regime, that when you were fighting the apartheid system, you were fighting to liberate these people. You did not fight for you to come and become shareholders in some of these big companies, or for you to come and loot state resources where now service delivery is affected because of tenders are given to your kids or your friends for your own selfish interests, where it is not about people that are competent to do the work if they're given a tender, or jobs are given to your kids or your friends, where young people can't just fill up a ZH3 and apply for a job and be certain that the process will be fair and free, where they will not be said, you have to be a member of the ANC. Recently in Bloemfontein, there was some posts that were out somewhere in Tabanch, you know, and young people went there, submitted their CVs. After 2 days, their CVs were thrown in the streets, you know, and that was painful under the very difficult conditions that even to go and type a CV, it's the resources that people don't have. To go and print your CV, it's the resources that people don't have, you know, but you have people who are saying they're representing the ANC-led government, and they do this to just ordinary citizens. It's so sad. I'll end there.
Thank you for your responses, Rebone. So we have another question here in the chat section. So I'm going to take that question and make it one round, and then you can respond to that. And then maybe if, seeing that we're running out of time as well, if you have any, unless if we get more questions or comments, but you can also use that time to wrap up. If you've got a particular point that you really want to drive home, then you can use this moment to do that. The comment and the question is from Kahiso Masilela, and it says, indeed, it appears as if youth league leaders keep quiet once they're in positions of power, blue lights, etc. Now, if the ANC Youth League was to dissolve and rebuild, don't you think history might repeat itself? So that's the question. So since unless if other comments and questions come through while you talk, you can also use this moment to make your last remarks. Over to you.
You can use the same approach. And that's what I'm saying. From 2013, there's been so many task teams of the Youth League. It's 2021. If something is not working, you need to change. Like, you can't be a scientist and you're trying different methods, the same ingredients, hoping to have different end results. That is disaster, you know? And that shows that you can't think outside of the box, because that's what the ANC and NEC has been doing. Putting the same ingredients with the hope of a different outcome of a youth league. Ideally, you think that they would say when they want to justify why they must disband the youth league. The 2015 NEC of the youth league was not disbanded because they were radical, because they were revolutionaries. They were mainly disbanded because they were quiet. I mean, if it was not for the young women's desk of the women's league, the ANC would have lost that youth vote. The young women's desk really tried through the 2019 elections to really push and give the ANC that youth vote, because the youth league was sleeping, was nowhere to be found, because they can't identify themselves with the young people because of the opulence lifestyle. They will never sit in a township, in a shibina, make an example. Not that I'm saying that people must be drunkards, but to sit there and listen to what these young people are going, because the youth league has become like the ANC. You know, the ANC leadership only goes to the townships when it's elections, when they're doing door to door. But on a day-to-day basis, for some individual just say, this weekend I'm going to spend whether in Mamelodi, or this weekend I'm going to spend in Soweto, or I'm going to spend in Alex, and just hang around with the community, you know, so that you don't lose touch with the reality of what's happening on the ground. And the youth league now starts to become that elites now, you know, they don't have time now. They will only go to the masses when they're doing door to door. And that's not the character of the youth league. The youth league lives within the community, breathes, and its life is within the community. The rebuilding, when you dissolve everything, what then it helps to do? Those who have joined the ANC for money, they will start to take their battles to the ANC, because now they can never use the Youth League anymore as a tool to go and negotiate and bargain with the ANC leadership, whether in the branch, whether in the region, whether in the province, or whether in the MEC. So what then you focus on? You revive the activism. The ANC in 2012 took a resolution. It says a decade of a cadre. Next year is 2022. Nobody knows how far the ANC is with this decade of a cadre, because that decade of a cadre was to produce a different breed of a cadre within the ANC. But unfortunately, we'll see even if they will report about it in 2022 at conference and say, this is how far we have gone with a decade of a cadre. So you need then to bring back a youth league where you revive activism, you push activism, you push political education. While you are doing that, you don't have to even do it over a year. Give yourself a period of 3 to 5 years for the youth league to cleanse itself so that you attract a type of breed. I can tell you, my brother, Vasile, I know young people in different provinces who are members of the youth league, who are activists. Over the years, they have left the youth league and they're doing well as activists in their communities, changing the lives of people in their communities, because they tell that I am not a politician, I'm an activist in my nature. And today, the Youth League and the ANC is led more by politicians more than activists who will put people first. So you need to bring back that spirit of activism if you are to rebuild the Youth League. Otherwise, you'll be doing the same thing. Again, after this conference of the ANC in 2022, we might be told that the Youth League is disbanded. We might not know the reasons now. There might be also reasons at that time to argue why the Youth League must be disbanded. So if ever be disbanding, putting task teams, but the task teams which are not bringing any results in terms of the rebuilding, and the ANC putting pressure, because I'll give an example. When I was in the task team of the Youth League, the ANC comes in and says to us, you need to rebuild the Youth League. While we're trying to rebuild the Youth League, we're told in 2 months' time, you must go to Congress. How do you rebuild something in a short period of time where there's no political education, there's nothing? What kind of results do you expect to have? Because a true revolutionary is guided also by politics and understanding of politics in terms of the role that they need to play in their own respective community or society. Because if you're not politically conscious of some of these things, that's why most now will see them living this lifestyle of Louis Vuittons and everything, because they're not politically conscious. They will go to the poorest communities, driving flashy cars, wearing their Louis Vuittons, and go and say to these people, vote the ANC. Go into a household where that community does not even, or a household where that house, there is not even food. When they open the fridge, they find 1 tomato in the fridge and a bottle of water. They don't know what they're going to eat at night. But one thing, and this is why in Gauteng, the ANC is going to see a huge decline going to the next conference, next elections in 2024. Because Gauteng in their nature, you can't buy them with food parcels on the eve of elections and say, yeah, food parcels, you're going to vote. Here you're dealing with a different breed of society in terms of how they see things and how they view things, and because they've got access to a lot of information. So in the rural areas, there is that decline for the ANC in the rural areas. You can look at the last elections, going to 2019 stats. You can see most provinces, the ANC declined by 10%. And it's not that people don't believe in the ANC, they still love the ANC, they love what the ANC stands for. But the problem is its leaders. Do they stand? Do they represent this organization that was organization of Bomandela, Botambo, Bosisulu? Today in 2021, we're seeing this step aside right now. And step aside, not that any faction is better than the other faction. I'll give an example. You had Ziziko Ota, who's the Deputy Minister of State Security, who was said where he was at some point getting some monies from Saudi, 50,000 from Saudi. It's the same Saudi who's linked to Isma Khashule on this case that they have now in the Free State. You have Bosasa, you've got Tabama Kwetla, who's the Deputy Minister of Defense, you've got Gwede Mantashe, who's the Minister of Minerals, who both of them had gotten certain security upgrades from Bosasa, you know. So the reality of the matter is that a lot of these leaders, they like to play each other against each other. But when you look at the names that are propping up at the State Commission, as names from both factions, and no other faction is better than the other, you know. There's no better devil. But the reality of the matter is that, and this is the Youth League that must come and tell the ANC that we don't want to inherit a dead ANC, because at the rate things are going, the ANC is imploding. It has reached it's a very difficult position where it is, and the Youth League needs to play a role where it can tell both factions that you are killing this organization, you are messing it up, and we're tired of these squabbles for political power and resources of this country. I'll end there, Thabiso.
Okay, thank you very much, Rebone, for your insights, particularly as someone who's coming from within the organization, and that's very brave of you to let out all this insider information. And we, especially as the youth, we need to have more of these conversations, because I believe through dialogue, that's when we'll be reminded. And that's the only way we can also come up with solutions, because the frustrations are becoming greater and greater with each passing year. Like as we celebrate each Freedom Day, we're always reminded of these frustrations. So we've come to the end of our session, and thank you again, Rebone, for your presentation, and thank you to everyone for attending. These conversations can continue. I mean, these are everyday conversations. They can also continue via Rebone as a YouTube page, Politicking via podcast with Rebone Tau, and the link was put there in the chat section earlier. So please subscribe and follow, and let's be part of these conversations, because these are issues that really affect us. Also, another reminder, please follow our Facebook and Twitter pages for any of these updates. Yeah, so we've come to the end, and hopefully we see you in our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.